Hoyoverse has been on a roll recently, with the extremely successful launch and continuation of Genshin Impact, as well as Honkai Impact finally ending its first part and being able to continue on to its second. There's a lot going for them right now. With that success, they've also introduced a brand new game, Honkai Star Rail. So can this game live up to its big shoes that it has to fill as Hoyoverse's next title? So I kind of wanted to address this part first before I get into my early thoughts about this game, but Genshin kind of set a new precedent for mobile titles. Regardless of what you may think of the game in terms of the sum of all its parts, Genshin was the first mobile game I played that felt more like a standard console PC video game than just a mobile game. Speaking strictly outside of the gacha elements, the game feels like something I could buy for $60 today, with its ever-expanding world and every region becoming more complex and uniquely designed. Going into Star Rail though, I didn't expect it to be like Genshin in regards to freedom and exploration, and it's not. Star Rail is a turn-based game, meaning its combat is kind of restricted. That's not a bad thing, but it means that the design is going to be different. There's no need for these expansive worlds with areas to climb and explore, because a lot more time is going to be spent probably in combat. There are people who will find this to be generally a bad thing and not want to play the game as much. But I mean, if you're expecting that from me here, you gotta kind of look at the games I'm talking about on this channel. To be frank, I think the lower emphasis on exploration and the more linear areas does make Star Rail feel different. But that's good, because if Star Rail was like Genshin, I don't think I'd be sticking with it for very long.
42 what? Are you even listening to me?
So in terms of presentation, there's a lot this game does that's similar to Hoyoverse's other titles. Much like Genshin, the UI feels pretty clean. There aren't any currencies floating around constantly reminding me of what I don't have, and that's nice since a lot of gacha games push that stuff directly into your face to make you spend more money. Or want to spend more money. But I guess it depends on the person. The areas in game are a lot less open, but the game itself isn't devoid of open areas. They're just a lot more compact. The nice thing is that you'll see a lot of rollable and playable characters in the world, instead of the game being restricted to generic NPCs. It's a nice touch considering Genshin only really does this on specific occasions, like events. Anyways, the game being linear isn't really a bad thing. It feels like a lot more emphasis is going into other aspects of the presentation, and I would argue that Star Rail doesn't feel any lower budget than Hoyo's other titles, it's just different. That said, if you're jumping into Star Rail expecting the same content load as Genshin, you're gonna be disappointed. The level of presentation and design is the same, but Genshin is unique in that most of the core gameplay does not require stamina. Star Rail avoids using stamina where it's not needed, and has its fair share of side quests and main story that you can do right now. But it's not going to be a game you're going to be spending hours and hours on end playing like Genshin. Even then, I'm sure like Hoyoverse's other games, the daily grind is eventually just going to turn into probably about 30 to 40 minutes a day. Maybe even shorter, who knows? As I mentioned before, Star Rail is a turn-based game, so the combat is a lot more focused on strategy rather than just team composition. It's kind of a different breed of what Genshin and Honkai are. My understanding of it so far, as again these are my early thoughts, is that each character basically occupies a niche. In combat, your job is to make sure each character is able to both utilize their niche, while also allowing for your other party members to use their own. A good example that they let you try out early is Himiko. Himiko has a passive that freely allows her to follow up with AoE damage if you break the stance of 3 enemies by hitting their weaknesses. So you want to make sure that your other 3 team members are also capable of hitting weaknesses on enemies so that you can capitalize a lot off of the free damage you get from Himiko's follow-ups. Another example is Seal, or Zila, whichever pronunciation you prefer I guess, where she gains an extra turn by defeating an enemy. You can effectively combine this with her ultimate, and she can sweep enemy teams pretty efficiently. And you might want allies that could drop defenses or give her buffs to excel. This is all basic turn-based stuff. You see this in a lot of turn-based RPGs, where you have party members that excel at specific things, and have specific jobs or categories that they get pushed into. But I feel like the niches in Star Rail are a lot more focused, and I think part of that is because of the core systems of the game that it needs to keep itself alive and well. Regardless, I found the combat to be pretty satisfying, even with just the free characters. Once you get into the flow of how your party members work, you can pretty efficiently wipe out enemies quick and easy. The systems aren't all that complicated either. Once you learn the basics of it, you'll probably get the hang of everything pretty quickly. Basic attacks restore skill points, skills consume skill points, and your ultimate can be used at pretty much any time, even during other enemy turns. Honestly, I haven't run into that many elements that gave me trouble unless I slip up and start autopiloting. But the game does provide some challenging boss fights and foes that require you to stop and think about how you're going to strategize. However, I'm unsure if this challenge exists because I lack the proper equipment, or if the game is prepared to handle that as well. We'll have to see later down the line when I actually acquire equipment that makes sense for me to use. Genshin and Honkai have stories that start off relatively slow and build up over time, as most stories kind of do, but I'd say that Star Rail is also no different. As a Honkai player, it's a lot easier to get into the story of Star Rail given that there are character designs that I'm familiar with, and aspects of said characters that are retained despite some of them having different personalities. Or most of them having different personalities. But putting aside that little slice of fan service, I think the story kind of starts in the same vein. I kept in mind while playing this game that it's likely going to span several years, meaning the story is going to take time to build up to its finale. If you go in expecting a complete narrative, then you'll definitely be disappointed because this is another live service single-player game that is, again, going to span multiple years. And I'm not really positive or negative on the story so far. As far as I'm concerned, sometimes it feels a little aimless, but I can usually feel that way with certain RPGs when they start off, because I'm not entirely sure what's going on. I'm enjoying the story for what it is so far, and there's hopefully a lot more life going into this main cast, as it seems like, unlike Genshin, where you just have the Traveler and Paimon, which really boils down to Paimon, Star Rail seemingly has a main cast of 3, being you, the Trailblazer, March 7th, and Danhun. This kind of allows the characters to have a little bit more of a group dynamic, which is pretty good. Honkai Impact also does this early in the story, so I don't know if they're going to follow the same kind of progression that it goes with. But I'm hoping they don't, just so we can have kind of this main trio and have them a little bit more fleshed out as the story develops. But while I am okay with the story right now, there are some minor things that I think Hoyoverse really needs to deliver on this time. For one, we have another silent protagonist, when we really don't need one. I mean, Honkai Impact shows that Hoyo can deliver exceptionally on actual main characters, but it seems like they choose not to. The Trailblazer is pretty much silent in any scene where it feels like they should have a voice. But there is an upside, and that's that when they're alone in their own thoughts, they have a voice. And some of those lines are voiced, which is something, I guess.
Choice I won't regret. Reach the future. So much has happened in such a short time.
Now my bigger concern is that we have 2 amnesia plotlines going on. I'm already not a huge fan of these, especially if the story uses these characters as plot devices. Amnesia plots are difficult to get right. I don't want to get too much into it here, but me feeling good about amnesia plots is going to be fully up to the execution of them in the end. All in all, the narrative is definitely going places, but whether that's good or bad is something I need to play more of and see more of in the future of this game, to really give you a full opinion on what I feel about the story.
And perhaps the grown-ups.
Sum up my thoughts nicely, Star Rail is a game that's meeting my expectations. I feel like it's too early to determine whether this game is going to be absolutely amazing or not, but right now I'm pleased that it's doing things to keep my attention. From having playable characters scattered around the world to a satisfying combat system, I'm enjoying myself. The music's also pretty good, though I hope we get some more battle themes in the future, and I assume we will, because Hoyo usually does deliver on music. Anyways, this game is pretty solid, and it doesn't really feel too gacha-y so far. These, of course, are my early impressions, and depending on how this performs, we'll see if you ever see me talk about this game again. And what do you think of Honkai Star Rail? Not interested in it? Think it looks good? Are you having fun with it, playing it? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or if you want to see more Honkai and Hoyoverse content by me. You could subscribe to the channel as well, so that you could see more videos related to Hoyoverse stuff, Honkai stuff, and, well, other JRPGs. We do a lot of Persona around here, if you haven't been here before. But I'm trying to stretch my arms out a little bit here, so hopefully you'll see more content besides just Persona stuff in the future. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Time for some swordplay. Blade in flight!